When MotoGP announced the end of the 500cc era, many believed Grand Prix racing was taking a step backwards. 4 strokes belonged in superbikes, 2 strokes belonged in Grand Prix racing. While the paddock argued about what MotoGP should become, Honda was busy building a motorcycle so revolutionary that within a year, the old world was gone. For over a decade, the NSR 500 ruled the top of Grand Prix racing. Its raw power and unpredictability defined the golden era of two-stroke racing. But as the rules changed, everyone else took a simpler route. You see, they just stuffed a 4-stroke engine into their old 500 frames. Honda, though, saw it differently. They didn't evolve the past, they built a future from the ground up. The V5 that would redefine what a MotoGP bike could be. So we've managed to catch a virtual flight down to Suzuka. They have a private test day for me in the rain. Ride this. Standing next to me here is this beautiful Repsol Honda RC211V. Showa swing arm, Bellini exhaust, rumble brakes front and rear. This thing was high tech. All you have to see really to know how high tech this was is if you go look at the bikes from the 2002 season. Everything else looked like a 500 that had gained a bit of weight. This thing looked like it was developed for 25 years by the most sophisticated engineers on the planet. Nothing on this bike is without purpose. As I slowly walk around it here, it is just a piece of art these days, and for me to get the right one, hopefully in a minute when I get out and track this, give me a set of wet tires and the wet mapping, not in slicks, as it is pretty wet here today in Suzuka. But just look at this. I could stand here all day and walk around it, but thankfully today we get to get in our leathers and go for a quick spin. So here we are, we finally have made it on the Suzuka circuit on the RC211V, depending on who you ask. This legendary machine won its inaugural race here in 2002 in very similar conditions here at Suzuka. Aboard that day was Valentino Rossi, as I am today. This bike wasn't the first bike to break the 200-mile-an-hour barrier. That was down to another Honda, the 1993 NSR 500, the first two-stroke to have fuel injection. That broke 200-mile-an-hour at Hockenheim by Shinichi Ito back all the way in 1983. But this, the RC211V, even Jesus, got it all mixed up there, was the first bike that kind of made the 200-mile-an-hour barrier regularly achievable. The NSRs of the late 90s and the early 2000s were regularly hitting high 190 miles an hour, but they weren't really piercing 200 miles an hour until this thing came along. And then the speed record year on year has been broken. And even adds up to today now, Jorge Martin on his factory Aprilia, 229 miles an hour. How bloody crazy is that? Even here in the rain and a wet map, 180 miles an hour before we get the anchors down. Bike just slides on in. This bike had a slipper clutch. It was known as a back torque limiter, and it does work, but you gotta be very good with your right hand in terms of your downshifts. A bit of a blip as well on the back shift. It's you kind of get into the habit of riding modern bikes where you can go 6th down to 2nd with no repercussions. This RC211V does not like that. It wants to kind of drift its way into the corner, which is great, but in the rain at a corner like turn 1 in Suzuka, such a fast corner, the way the bike wants to enter it, if you go back a handful of gears, is pretty sketchy. Here it's spinning up there out of the slow corner. There's so much poke. The like I mentioned already, Shinichi Ito was one of the main test riders for the RC211V back in the early 2000s, even the late 90s when this first broke cover. You see there through the headstock, the bike starting to twist and bend as we put the power down and the rear just starts spinning. He said one of the biggest difference between this and the 500 of that time is that when you clicked 5th and 6th gears, this thing didn't stop, it just kept going, had so much more in it. That's again probably why I kind of go back to the 200-mile-an-hour barrier, where it was consistently breaking that kind of infamous figure really. 200 miles an hour on 2 wheels was pretty crazy. Again, just has so much power, and like I said, even in this wet map here, going to be well into the 180 miles an hour before we get on the brakes for 130R. Slightly wrong there. I got actually out onto the white line and maybe even a bit of the grass. It is a handful, this bike. I must say it's not as easy as Valentino made it look. Fortunately, we do have a slightly different layout to what they ran in 2002. 2002 they would use that chicane there, which unfortunately we don't have access to today. But a bit more about this bike. I've linked a little document below this video that will essentially break down everything about this bike. It'll go in depth about everything you could want as a motorcycle kind of breakdown you'd get, really. And they have now kind of, I don't know when they did it, but they have released pretty much every single bit of data you could ever want on their own website about this bike. Firing order, stroke and bore, how many like this things you just learn about this bike. Just a little research for this video, I learned that it has 3 oil pumps, this bike, and it was a semi-dry sump system. It's just so very interesting. It's a 75.5 degree V5 engine. Just like, unfortunately, in modern day MotoGP, we're limited to 1000 cc's and a maximum of 4 cylinders. So the likes of a V5 will never be really again. And like, it was such a gamble for Honda to go to a V5 of all things. Like, it was just such an interesting move. And man, like, just take a look at this machine. Like, it's just perfect from the ground up. And like, I've shown stats earlier on in this video of what it did win. But imagine if Valentino committed his career through to 2007, we'll say, at least, when they went to the RC211V, which was a bit of a dog, really. Imagine, this would have won probably 80%, maybe 85% of the 990 era. This thing would have wiped the floor. The only reason this didn't win more, and I'm saying that as if it didn't win at all, it won nearly half its races entered, is only because Valentino jump shift took his team, built a impressive Yamaha that was able to beat the best in the world on this. See, they're skating, and underneath me it's a real on-edge machine, this. So we go for a little tear off there just so we can see where we're going. Even riding around this speed, just trying to talk about the bike. So I have to pay a lot of attention to this thing. Just look at this. Imagine what this would have been like in 2002. The funny thing was, after Valentino wrapped up the title in 2001, after the season had ended, of course, everybody knew the 2-strokes were going to be up against it with these. Well, at the time, a lot of people thought that the 2-stroke were going to be lighter, nimbler, and because 500 2-stroke versus 4-stroke 1000 or 990, the 2-strokes look like they potentially would still be able to beat these things, because they felt that at the time the 4-stroke, the 990s, were going to be pretty heavy and they weren't going to be very good in the first couple of years. So there was talks, and Valentino said himself that maybe in 2002 I'll continue with the 500, the Cinquecento as he always called it. But no, he did jump on this, and I think he did test it, and I think from the moment he tested, he knew this bike was special. And in fairness to Valentino, he was very good at many things. Picking out a good bike and knowing what was special was something he was very good at over his career. Another amazing stat is just how many people won on this bike. There was just so many different guys got on this bike and was successful. There was, of course, Hayden, Valentino, Melandri, Barros, Biaggi, a couple of the Japanese, Tamada won on it, Ukawa on it. There was just so many guys. There's probably more that I can't think of now at the top of my head, but there were so many people that got on this bike and was just quick, and they won straight away. So this was a real weapon of a machine. I think Danny Pedrosa, in 2006, he won his first race in that season on this road. So just so many people victorious aboard this wonderful bit of kit. Just look at that power, and I'm like half throttle there, really. It's just spinning up so much. It just has so much punch. And like, again, there's clips throughout the 990 era, especially when Valentino was on it, Nicky as well, of just the bike. This thing just never was in line. It was always going sideways. And at that time in Grand Prix racing, you had the likes of Gary McCoy, the bikes were never in a straight line. They were always sideways. And that's the way they were ridden. And that was, again, like I said at the start of the video, a lot of people feared for what Grand Prix racing was coming when it went to the MotoGP class. But as I think we all can say now as we look back, these bikes were really part of a golden era. For all the incredible motorcycles that have raced in Grand Prix history, very few can claim to have really changed the sport. The Honda RC211V was one of them. Born during a time of uncertainty, when the world of motorcycle racing was saying goodbye to the legendary 500cc 2-strokes, Honda didn't just build a replacement, they built a revolution. The V5 engine, to performance to dominance, it all came together to create a machine that would define an era and set the standard for everything that followed. Even today, more than 20 years later, the RC211V is still spoken with the same admiration and respect as the greatest motorcycles ever built. Not because it was the fastest, not because it won most races, but because it proved that MotoGP's future could be every bit exciting as its past. The two-stroke era may have ended, but thanks to the RC211V, a new golden age had begun.